haven't met, and I do know a lot of you in the room, but I don't know all of you. My name is Judith Batchelar. I have the privilege and indeed responsibility for being the chair of the RPA Management Board. So it's my pleasure to welcome you here. On behalf of our host here today, Instinctive Partners, who we're very grateful to for lending us their lovely facilities, and also on behalf of my colleagues at the RPA. So what we've got planned for you today is a short introduction from me to set the scene. And really, the purpose of today is to share with you some updates on things that have been happening at the Rugby Players Association, to share some of our thinking around some of the hot topics within rugby, and also, more importantly, to share our vision for the future. And we see that as a two-way process, so hence the Q&A panel that the wonderful Ed Jackson is going to host for us. So, as I say, we will have some opportunities for refreshment and breakouts so that you can get to chat to each other and talk about some of those things. And hopefully, we'll all run on time and we'll be able to give you some lunch and you have the opportunity for further networking. So an action-packed morning. I hope you find it informative, but please do ask lots of questions. And I hope you find it enjoyable. And if you don't, we'd like your feedback, good and bad, on what we could do better. Because we see this as an ongoing dialogue between us and our fellow members of the rugby ecosystem, as we would call it. And that will only work if we're all engaged and we are honest with each other. So that's the plan for today. The first bit of update news, and some of you will all know this already, is that for the first time in very many years, we have a democratically elected General Secretary in Christian Day. Again, many of you will know Christian as a former player, and he's been with the RPA for a while now, and he knows the game and the challenges of the game inside out. You're going to have the opportunity to grill him, both on the panel later, in a few minutes even, and obviously through the course of today. And please take that opportunity, because I know he's very keen to share his hopes and aspirations for the RPA. But I know that you will join me in wishing Christian all the very best in his new role, because he's got an important job to do. So no pressure there, Christian, but thank you, and looking forward to working with you. We've also got a host of new non-execs joining our board, or have joined our board as of the beginning of January. Mike, Hannah, Nick and Helen bring to our board a range of skills and talents that we desperately need in order to push our agenda forward. So on everything from commercial strategy to data and digital technology, to people, diversity, inclusion, corporate affairs, public affairs, and communications know-how. Those individuals bring their wealth of talents to our board, and I'm extremely grateful to them. Mike can't be here today, but you'll get the opportunity to, again, ask Hannah questions on the panel, and Nick and Helen here are too. So please take the opportunity over coffee and lunch to get to know them and ask them lots of questions. And that move is really important for me as chair, and I do feel very privileged that I have got these talented individuals that are joining the talented leadership team at the RPA and the executive at the RPA, as I say, to move forward on that agenda and bring some diversity to the thinking and the way that we approach things. So thank you to them. As you know, the reason the RPA exists is to make the world a better place for our players, both on and off the pitch. And we've been doing that for very many years, and I happen to think we do it rather well. There are some things we do better than others, but that's normal for any organisation. But one of the things that any organisation does is to look at themselves, compare themselves to what's going on, and talk about what their hopes for the future are. There is always room for improvement, and there is always room for progress. So we have looked at our future, and I have to thank my colleagues at the RPA who are sitting here, because they have done the hard yards on this, visiting the clubs, talking to our members, and really getting the feedback to shape that future vision, because we're here to represent our members, and we're here to make sure that the things that we do on their behalf are the things that fulfil their hopes and ambitions for a players' union. So we've done that, and I put this slide up because for some of you, you may be very familiar with what we do as an organisation, but others may not be quite so familiar. So if you look at that, we do everything from insurance to education grants, looking at brain health, player welfare. But essentially, what we do as an organisation falls into three sort of buckets of activity. The first is as a union representing our members, and that's pretty straightforward in terms of what that entails. The second is the services, the support that we give to our players, and we give to our players as individuals, and quite often we can't talk about that because the very nature of the support and help that we're giving those players is confidential. And we also support our players as a collective, and those are the things you tend to hear about because that's the collective view, or what we would call the voice of the RPA. And then the third area is offering expert advice, and that expert advice might be legal advice, it might be financial advice, it might be contractual advice, and those kind of things become really important in the game, particularly when you've got challenges and individuals have challenges. And that is invaluable support because we do want to give our members the best possible advice. But we do all of those things, but one of the things that we asked our members is, what are the things that are most important to you? And these are the things that were most important to them. And that forms the basis of what we call our manifesto. And those things won't be of any surprise to you. And the women's game is a big opportunity, but also what we do for our retired members and our retired players network, which was launched late last year, is a good example of that. But when you come down to it, there are 4 areas that those members told us are really important. The first is player health, and what that means in the broadest sense of player health. And the bottom line on that is our players want to play more rugby over a longer period of time. And that might sound counterintuitive because we always talk about players playing less rugby. We want them to play less rugby, but we want them to play it for longer because they're healthy, they're fit, and they're able. And as we look after them when they retire from the game, we know that we're confident they've got a long and healthy future. Player rights in providing a safety net, and that safety net below which no player will fall. And that could mean anything from minimum wages to basic employment rights. A fair deal, placing our players at the centre of the game's development. This is an unbelievably exciting time for our sport. And you think about what happens every weekend in Premiership Rugby, the games, even on an international level, European level, some fantastic rugby. We all have big ambitions for the game, but the players want to be a part of how that develops. And then investing in players' futures, and later you'll hear from Luke and the Gainline team about some of the things that we do in that space. So lots to focus on. But when we looked at those 4 things, we said to ourselves, what does any normal organisation do? You look at how you measure up versus others. So we did a big benchmarking exercise. We looked at not just rugby, we looked at other sports, we looked at other geographies, we looked at what other unions do and how they represent their members, and basically established where we sit on that continuum of good, average, excellent. And you know, the answer is nobody's brilliant at everything, so some things we're good at, some things we're not so good at, and the same would be true for the rest of the rugby system. But there's one thing understanding how you measure up and where you sit in all of this. There is another thing altogether to say, where would I want to be in the future? And that's the bit that we've been working on, and that's the bit that we want to be able to share with you. Our hopes, our ambitions, our visions for the future. And the way we approached this was to say, we have choices. We have choices about where we place our future ambition for the game. And I suppose we talk about it as being legal minimum. So you come to work, you do the things you need to do, you go home. There is an average that everybody performs to that is a normal for a sector. So whatever sector you may work in, there will be an average. It's the laws of mathematics. And then there are people that are at the cutting edge, that are world class, best in class, world leading. But you can't be brilliant at everything. The trouble is, when you ask people about what they want to do, everybody wants to be world leading. Nobody gets up in the morning, comes to work and says, today I'm going to be really average. Or today I'm going to come to work and I'm just going to do the legal minimum that I have to do. Everyone wants to be at the cutting edge, and particularly in competitive sport they do. And everyone wants to feel they work for an organisation that is world leading. But as I say, you can't be good at everything because A, it may not be appropriate, B, it's not practical, C, it might be unaffordable. But if you pick the things you want to be world class at, and you have a laser-like focus on those things you want to be world class at, by definition, you will be world class on the other things, because it's how you show up and what you want to be famous for. And those 4 things that I've just talked about, for us, are the things that are in that top right-hand corner, where we want to be world leading and world class. And that means leading the debate, leading the conversation, having days like today, engaging people, focusing on the things that basically motivate and concern our players, our members, where there is a strong business case to do it, where it makes sense for us to focus on those things, and it aligns to our ambitions to support our players. You could talk about this for a long time, and everybody will have different views on what they think sits in that top right-hand corner. But we're very clear on the message that we've got from our members about what that looks like. And that means we have to influence the agenda, and we influence the agenda in 3 ways. The things that are what I would call the mechanics and the infrastructure of the game. You know, the policies, the regulations, the contracts, the guidance, the guiding principles, and then how those things are implemented. Because having a great policy is one thing. That policy is only a great policy if it's implemented well, and that you know how you're performing and that you review that annually. So influencing the agenda, a big part of what we do, and making sure the mechanics and the infrastructure are in place. The second one, in terms of how we influence, and I'm sharing this because I'm going to give you all a challenge on this one, is how we make sure we publish our point of view. This is a live call for evidence around women's sport, and it finishes on the 3rd of February. If you've never submitted written evidence to anything, then I would encourage you to do so, because the more people that give evidence, the better the consultation is, and that can be individuals as well as organisations. And basically this was around women's football and the follow-on from the great performance of our women's football team. That's the first question, but the other questions apply to women's sport more generally. Making sure that the RPA respond to these kinds of consultations, and that our view that we publish is the view of our members and is made public and is there for the official record, is really important. Even if you went back 18 months ago, we probably wouldn't even know that this call for evidence existed, and we certainly wouldn't be active in this space, and we certainly wouldn't be formalising our point of view. But we are now, and it's important that we do that, and it's important that we have our voice. And then the third area is, and this could be the professional game agreement, it could be standard contracts, it could be anything, is being part of the conversation, part of the discussion, and being there at the outset. And we talk about this, and there's some good examples of this happening already, in being partners and co-creators. We had a fantastic meeting last week around diversity and inclusion, and all the members of the system were there talking about it, contributing to it, and basically helping to co-create a roadmap for improving what we do in that space. So we see ourselves, our players see ourselves, as I say, partners and co-creators in all of this, with those 4 things at the heart of what we want to do. So that sounds pretty straightforward, but we work in the most complicated system, both domestically and internationally. And there's a few stakeholders there, but if you think about the stakeholders in rugby, and I would include media, I would include fans, I would include the community game, it is very, very difficult to navigate. But if we are to drive the kind of systemic change we want to see, you need to have the system in the room, in the tent, part of the conversation. So we set that challenge out there because we believe that we need to operate as a system. We need to operate as a collaborative set of organisations, because if we don't collaborate and we don't have a cohesive approach to some of these big issues, it's unlikely that we are going to drive the change that we want to see. And we're optimistic. We believe we can drive those changes that we want to see, but we know that requires us not just to have great plans, great visions, great strategies, but great implementation that comes from collaborative working. So that's our aim and ambition. We'd love your feedback, because that's part of why we're here today. It's not just to talk at you, but also to talk with you and to create a dialogue, which is why we'll come onto the panel and why the breakout sessions are hopefully going to be a two-way process.